Hello and welcome into the Sorare Data Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Joined today by a very special guest, Peter Stojanov, also known as Yowza. You guys may have seen him on Twitter or Sorare. Peter, I've been really excited to have you on because, as I mentioned before, we mention you a lot on this show. There are a couple episodes, and you're in the chat sometimes, and I felt bad just constantly talking about you and not giving you the opportunity to stand up and say yourself, show yourself. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be on. I think I've been listening to the Sorare Data Show since back when Sean was talking about how to build a 5 ETH gallery, kind of back in the good days. So it's great to finally be on and be a part of that.
Man, could 5 ETH go a long way these days? Man. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming in. There were a few people who jumped in yesterday thinking we were going Tuesday, and in fairness to them, there was no stream yesterday. I was working on that video about how we do projected lineups. So everybody go check that one out. But thank you everybody for coming in. The comments that I see at the top now, Jakob here talking about Pranksy's Cap 240 super rare lineup, which I assume is just absurd because all of his lineups are. Toby and Alex, who's not even here, stressing over the Jupiler playoffs, I believe. So thank you guys. You're on the podium. Bob Franklin, what's up? Tuggy, thanks for coming in. Vita's here. I think Vita's going to like this conversation. This is right up his alley of things that he's interested in. What do we got? Mike Basson heading out. Everybody's here and then heading out. But anyway, Mike Basson, what's up? Hilo. Oh, Sorare Data during lunch. There we go. Must be another American, or at least, our time zone here. Kev Hurd, what's up? Peace, love, understanding. KB, Johanatin, Sora Holland. Connor Harper, excited for this. It's my first time live after Peter introduced me to your show about a year ago. Hey, Peter, thanks so much for that. How about that? Myself and Peter have been sharing silly strategy ideas for a couple of years now. What's the worst idea you've come up with?
Playing U23 limited 2 years ago. I think we bought some goalkeeper Okoye or something who was potential transfer.
Okoye, hell yeah.
And then just got benched immediately. Yeah. So that was great.
Did he end up at Watford and then got benched there?
Yep.
He started recently, didn't he?
I don't think he's U23 anymore, though.
Udinese? Oh, man, this is one of those, why would you ever know this thing? He does play for Udinese, and he's been playing. Oh, he's awful, though. I think make you feel good about what you're missing here. Let's see here.
In fairness, I think he was awful years ago, too. But
it is one of those funny things that, you look at starting U23 goalies and you're like, he starts, it's fine. And then you get a 4 and you're like, oh, maybe this isn't fine. But anyway, that's actually not that bad. So we'll see. Agent Cooper, I have no idea who Peter Stojanov is, which is weird because we've talked about him. But my guess is he's either going to be intelligent and thoughtful Sorare expert or Serbian attacking midfielders from the 90s. Despite the DC United shirt, he's not a Serbian attacking midfielder from the 90s, but very intelligent. I'll give him that. Vice, what's up? Oh, yeah. Pander's the new Okoye, which, yeah, that sounds about right. My kind of Sorare game, numbers from Carol. So that's, there it is. So this is the Vita is right. He goes to the championship, so much utility, except he doesn't because he's benched. Yeah. Yeah. Midweek benchings. Always love that. But anyway, Peter, I love everything that you put out. You have this dashboard that we're going to go through as well as your Medium, which has a lot of great stuff on it. Your background is in economics. And we were kind of talking before how I think everyone who plays Sorare is an amateur economist, and it's evident how amateur we all are at it. As an actual economist, what is it about Sorare that interests you so much?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, it's really the fact that there's 2 aspects to Sorare. There's the gaming side of things where it's all about how can we predict or project how a player is going to do. And then there's, of course, the valuation side of things. So there's a whole secondary market, a primary market now that's very important with how Sorare is running the gaming side of things. And so it's just a really interesting platform because it really marries those two in a way that just feels more relevant than maybe something like FIFA or something where it's these are all virtual. It is real money at the end of the day. So how we kind of treat those things and how we make decisions, really, yeah, always really like that part.
not only just real money, but also everything we do is predicated on how players perform in real life, and or just how Opta scorers see games in real life.
Yeah, it's definitely like a very reactionary market. I don't think that's like, I'm not like breaking the wall or anything by saying that. Like everybody knows that. The challenge is just like, how can we make the best decisions going forwards, picking the best players and finding value. And, there's some issues that Sorare faces on the market side of things, but, it's difficult. Like it's hard. I don't really know of anything quite like this that's trying to get, like, the difficulty isn't just handling the market for 1 year, it's handling a market for 20 years, right? Or at least that's the idea. We all hope Sorare exists for 20 years. And that's really difficult to do.
So what was the first, like, can you think of like the first time where you really wanted to like dive into the numbers of something in Sorare that got you to then be like, to go deeper and deeper and eventually create this dashboard, which again, I'm kind of hinting at, but we'll get into it because it's really impressive. But also I think there's a little bit that is like, it's one of those things that's really helpful if you know what you're doing, and a lot of people don't know what they're doing. And so we'll get into that as well. But like, what was the first thing that you were like, oh, I really want to study this?
Yeah. So it was actually, there's YouTuber Simply Alex. So we had been talking a little bit about like, how do we value these competitions? And that felt like a really important discussion about a year and a half ago, when Sorare had, all of the different regions, but of course the cap modes and the all-star mode, and Rare Pro. Like it felt like there were a lot of places to play sort of all of these cards. And so how do we make the best decision we can on where to play our cards? And, at the end of the day, it kind of stemmed to like, let me try to figure out, how do we value these prize pools, which is a little complicated, just because there's different prize pools, then there's different tiering for all the prize pools. That tiering changes over time. So how do we take all of that into account? And then how do we take sort of the user side of things? And then basically, long story short, that's how you kind of created, or I kind of created an expected value side of things. And once I had that number, it became like, oh, let's see how things are changing over time. Because I think the biggest thing that's missed when I look on Twitter, or I look on kind of discussions that are being had maybe on the Discord, is just, it's very point in time focused. And this is where, I don't get envious of Sorare, because they have a difficult job of managing user expectations for a single game week, when in reality, we need to be looking over the course of maybe a month or 2 months to see how things are playing out. And that's not easy to do.
It is something that I feel like I've kind of discussed on this channel, that we really want to figure out some sort of conclusion or outcome based on what is realistically not much data at all. That, like you said, we look at one game week, scores are too high. You needed 500 points to get a tier 5. And what I kind of try to stress to people, which I will admit feels very hypocritical, because I don't actually do this. Like, deep down, I just don't want, I'm impatient. That's really what it is. But you just need to have more data to really understand what's going on. And so, like we said, like, we look at one game week and like, that's not enough, but like, is a month a game week? Is a month a long enough time? Is it 3 years? Is it? And so, like, how many data points do you really need? There is no like clear answer to that. There's no like, oh, once we hit 50, we'll know. But it does feel like, if you do look at things from an economic standpoint, you would never look at just one game week and like have any conclusions. But obviously we all do that. But like, does it feel like we're getting to a point where we have enough data to make some sort of conclusions on what's going on?
I think the hard part right now is, I felt like I had that answer 2 months ago, and then the gameplay changed, which, from like a tracking perspective, like I had a dashboard that had maybe like 80 game weeks worth of data in it. And I really enjoyed using it because I just could see the trends long term. I could zoom in on a specific point in time and try to understand what's going on. Now I feel like I only have a month's worth of data. Now, I know that there are some adjustments I can do, but that's a lot of work to do. And so that's really difficult. But, you know, there's also like different market impacts. So, you know, I think it's building. It was really difficult the first few game weeks, I think, for everybody, because the way that players are moving around in divisions, the way the market kind of reacted with the in-season competitions, it just caused everything to just kind of come out of sync. So I feel like I finally have a better grasp of things. But yeah.
Vita here said the tough part is not only to understand the value and ROI for a given competition at a specific point of time, but also ponder with gallery decay over time and anticipating the Sorare moves, which then followed up. By the time you finally gather enough data and manage to build the robust model, the game changes. Do you find that the new gameplay makes it easier for you to see kind of the expected value of these competitions, or do the divisional changes, which I guess shouldn't be quite as fluid as they were early on because they reduced the percent of promotion and relegation, but like, does it feel like it'll be easier to figure out the expected value of these competitions?
So I think what makes it easier is the fact that we just have cash competitions. Like I think you've said this on a lot of shows. It's really easy to understand how do we value cash. It becomes harder to value how do we value cards, and then it becomes even harder now. How do we value these boxes, which is like something I haven't even managed to like put into the dashboard yet. I would love if maybe those percentages would be in the API instead of me having to like write them all down. Maybe they're in the API. I just cannot find them, but that's a whole different. But you know, I think I like the way to value things now. I actually personally, I'm a big fan of the new gameplay. I think it makes things a lot more crystal clear. Maybe that's because there's less decisions you have to make. I think the decision process used to be, do I play in Champion America? Do I play in All-Star? Do I play in Cap 270? For example, let's say you have elite cards, and those are sort of the competitions you can fit them in.
Right.
Now it's, do I play in Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4, All-Star, or Cap 270? And, you know, we can talk about how Sorare is managing the divisions. Like, I think we can get into that later, but it's a lot easier to see now kind of what they're doing.
Let's jump right into that.
Okay.
Well, you say it's like, what is it about the divisions that you think makes it easier, I guess?
Well, what makes it easier is just there's no cap to enter like any of the divisions. So it's sort of streamlined in that you can only play your card here. Like I can't play my Messi in Champion, or I can't play him, which I understand has always been true. Like I know I couldn't have played him in Champion, but it just feels like there's less places to play because there is no Rare Pro, for example, now. And so I think for me personally, the decision has never been easier, because I want to win the best prize. Like that's how I approach the game week. So I want to look where I can get the highest sort of EV. What competition is offering me the highest EV? Mm-hmm. And even if the scoring is higher for it, I'd rather be in that pool, because the upside for me is so much higher than the downside of just instead of churning $5, I'd rather win $750. Like that's my approach, because I think that that'll make up in the long term. Now it's really hard to win and get first, but I think if you're playing the game in a way where you're looking for the best players in the best places, you should always be in Division 1. And I think the way Sorare is managing the cash side of things is good, and some of the adjustments they've made recently are better. I think they still have some improvements they can do. When I visualize things, I'm like, something doesn't feel quite right with the structure, and we can talk about that in a bit. And then the card side of things, I'll be blunt, I have some issues with how that's being managed. I think the distribution needs to look a lot different for the cards, and that's something we can also get into after the dashboard.
Well, I'm going to forget about it, so I'm going to keep
Okay.
going on that. Do you find that it's too many in the lower divisions?
So if you want, I would say go ahead and pull up the dashboard.
Yeah.
Go to the visualization. So, there's been a huge conversation recently on how do we reward divisions properly. It feels like the lower divisions, you need less points and you can get the same quality cards.
Right.
So a couple of things you can do to make it a little easier to look at. You can scroll down to the very bottom. And then in the bottom right, you can go full screen. But if that's too difficult, you don't need to scroll up just a little bit more. Sorry. And then close to the share. Yeah. And then go to rewards by division in the top right. So this is looking at game week 469. When you take a look at this, Laird, what comes to mind? We can see the different colors of the cards and the points needed on the scale. What does this kind of make you think about?
It certainly looks like the higher divisions require higher scores, and we have obviously more in there. So a quick question. So like this star, this is Challenger Division 5. The idea is that this star is not as valuable as these stars?
No, so I think, and this is where the fine tuning comes in on how do I visualize
That's
this.
points.
I want to make sure it's easy to read. So what I think I'm trying to show in this sort of visualization is the points you need to win the same quality card across the divisions. So if we look at Challenger Classic Season and all of the divisions, and we take a look at Tier 3 Limiteds, you need a lot more points in Div 1 and Div 2 to win a Tier 3 Limited than you do in Div 3, then Div 4, then Div 5. It feels like it's a sliding scale downwards.
Right.
And this is where I see one of the big flaws in the current way that they're doing cards in these classic competitions, because they've kind of found themselves in a difficult position. They found themselves in a spot where people feel like they want to be lower because it takes less points to win a card. But at the same point, if it's the same amount of points for every division to win a card, what's the point of divisions? You can just enter anywhere. And then if it's easier to win in Div 1, well, that doesn't make any sense because we need more. You should be better to be playing in Div 1. So we've kind of entered this issue where the way that the way I feel it is that they're not distributing cards properly across all of the divisions. I personally feel, maybe I'm monologuing now, but I personally feel that, Div 5 should be much more heavily weighted on Tier 5s through Tier 3s. And then as we move up the divisions, it's Tier 4s to Tier 2s, then Tier 3s to Tier 1s, and then you win the stars only in the top divisions, which might be unpopular, but I don't see this isn't when I look at this, I don't see a solution outside of that.
I only made that face because I completely agree. That seems to be the solution to wanting to progress.
Yeah.
Because right now, as we continue to see that it's not there, and yes, there are obviously more stars available in the top tiers, but certainly for this challenger, and again, we're doing exactly what we were just saying not to do, and we're looking at a single game week in order to do this. But there are more stars available, let's say in Challenger Classic Division 1 than Division 5, but it is still significantly harder to get it points wise than at least Division 5 and 4 and 3. There was who's the question? Vita was saying, is Division 1 in Champion Division 1 an anomaly? Because it does kind of look like this line, and maybe it was just this single game week that it was easier to win stars in Division 1 than everywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where it's like we want to look over multiple game weeks. So if you go in the top right and see game week, and then see some arrows on the right and left. So if you click, 471 will load. But we're still just seeing this. I'm seeing the same trends. And if you click one more time, you'll see 473. This trend is continuing to exist. I don't like to look at 463 or 465 or even 467 too much, because divisions were new, people are getting placed all over the place. We're seeing some wonky things. But this is sort of how things are starting to settle. And this is where, it's important to look over time, because you're right. We just looked at 469. There are anomalies that can happen. People can have a crazy score. Like, I'm trying to see if there's something like in Div 2, like we'll see crazy scores all the time, like in the Premier League Classic Limited. But we're seeing that trend starting to emerge over time. So I'm starting to be like, okay, this is an actual pattern. Sorare as a team should probably look into how can we address this. My other radical solution is that, I think, and this is something that MPen has also mentioned in a very old article, but we should maybe be having users be in like more of a triangle pattern. Most of the users in Div 5, and then decreasing users as we go up and up and up, which sort of matches the size of the prize pools.
Because right now it's basically my wife, the old geometry teacher, would kill me for calling it a diamond, but it's basically a diamond, because Div 5, at least in limited, and 1, I think are the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
Size-wise, yeah. And I assume that the point of that is to like get people out of Division 5 and into kind of the middle. But the prizes are there. So somebody was commenting like here it was. KB said, but a star isn't necessarily a star. I don't think the winner of Div 5 wins Mbappe. The problem is that the winner of Div 5 still wins the better card than the first tier 1 in Div 1. And is that okay? I don't know. Let's see. He just said the alternative, and I feel like I'm redundant, is having much more value in boxes and much better boxes in top divisions, which, yeah, that seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. And yeah, Vita brings up a great point there. Like, if they want to keep this how it is, if they're like, there's not a better solution than this, the boxes, that's where we need to see scale. Mm-hmm. And right now, like, we don't see that scale. I'm sure that they're working on things in the background. I think they've said that multiple times, but that's where they've got to nail it then.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically they are different because you can win kind of the premium boxes, but I don't think anybody, like, we don't even know if it's true.
It's not enough though. Right now, the way it is, it's not enough of an incentive currently.
Mm-hmm. Tuggy said the answer is no cards in the bottom division. Escaping in boxes are your rewards, then shift the rewards upwards, which I don't know if I'm against that. It feels very rough in the super rare level, but in limited and rare, maybe it does.
Yeah, and that brings up a point. Like, I do think it's really hard to look at trends in super rare and unique. That's probably part of the reason Sorare have a difficult time nailing those two divisions, because you just get less data. There's less people playing. There's less data points. There's fewer it's just harder to see the trends. We see that when we talk about how the reward pools are structured. Even it's like there's not enough market data. Maybe there's different ways we should be looking at things. So it does get hard in super rare and unique. So typically when I work on analysis, I like to focus in limited or rare. That's where a lot of users are playing anyways, but it's also just easier to see the patterns there.
Every single day that I play this game, it makes me appreciate just how different the super rare market and gameplay is from rare. And I mean, I don't play uniques at all. I imagine it's a completely different economy as well. But not that Sorare has given up on progression up scarcities, although they did, I think it was Guy on the Sorare Ramble last week said that they now look at progression. Was it progression? I feel bad now that I might butcher this, but I thought he said they look at progression now as using more like multi-entry, that instead of progressing from rare to super rare, you progress from one rare lineup to three, and then one in season to three. And like that path is probably takes long enough that going up a scarcity doesn't even matter. And so there is just, it feels like there's much more separation between the scarcities now. And maybe I'm being naive that limited and rare seem to feel closer. Like, so we're looking at limited now. Does rare look like this too?
Oh, I did not put a filter in for rare. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. But yeah, rare is similar. Like when I've compared it, Div 4 is the lowest and it moves up. I'm seeing the same pattern there. I just like to look at Div 5 because then it's a little bit clear. I can see 5 little steps instead of just 4. And that's, part of the reason. Mm-hmm. I think limited's always great to look at, but
I think what the benefit of limited is just that it's so liquid that it, like, the market is liquid and there's so many people who are entering these contests, and now we have so many contests anyway, and so many divisions that we talk about the sample size is so small when you look at things, and limited gives us the greatest sample size of what's going on. I also feel like it's by far the most reactionary, but maybe that's okay.
And I mean, we do see extremes in scoring here. Like that right-hand side is always going to look really crazy on limited because there's more opportunity for people to have crazy lineups. It's easier to get the cards.
Have you taken any time to look at these trends kind of over time and think maybe I shouldn't be playing champion, or contender's actually harder than you think? Like what are some of the observations you've seen from those, or you've gotten, excuse me?
So yeah, what I think about, this is going to be a hard question for me to answer because I like the MLS. Like I basically have a almost solo MLS gallery, except for the pieces of Challenger Europe that I'm now forced to have to be able to compete, to truly compete at the level I need to. But I've always been like an MLS boy. So, it's one of those things right now where it's also really hard to judge champion because sure, we have Premier League, but I expect some changes on how scoring looks to champion once we have Bundesliga and once we have La Liga in there, because that's going to be a really interesting market to watch. We're basically doubling the utility of most of the cards there, but you can still only play the card in one spot. So it's doubled utility, but it's not really doubled utility at the same time. So what that really impacts should be scoring, and we should see lower scores needed. So I would say maybe the score per EV, which is starting to add together a lot of things, would be much more attractive, but we should see that reflected on the market. And so that's where I would then look at it. It's like, what am I seeing in terms of ratios of expected values? And am I seeing that same dynamics in the marketplace? And if I feel personally that I'm not seeing that in the marketplace, then that's when it becomes attractive to go into the market to pick up some of those players. And some of the EVs are on the original, or on the main page of the dashboard, which if you want to talk about, we can.
There was, where was this? Oh, Carol was asking if there was a similar table for cash tournaments.
So there is an interesting table for cash. I don't have a similar one in terms of the points needed for cash, but if you went to the rewards by division, and then you clicked cash distribution, this is something I just kind of cooked up this morning, so it's definitely not perfect. But I kind of wanted to assess here, how have things changed in terms of how Sorare is awarding prizes? They changed the prize pool recently, and I think 473. How different does that actually look? And we can see that big increase in Division 1, a lot more payouts. We can see those boxes getting bigger in D1 and the boxes getting smaller also. in Division 3, 4, and 5. What's really strange to me with the allocation right now is Division 4. They really cut Division 4. And what makes it weird is when you look at Division 5, which has less people in it, it doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me. So I hope Sorare see this trend maybe over the next couple of weeks and make an adjustment there.
Well, so the boxes basically represent like the payout per, like not per, but like if these were all the payout spots, then each one is like, obviously this is first place. And so the biggest box takes up the most space in this group, right?
Yeah.
And I find no reason to think that you would know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask, what would be the reason to have Division 5 greater than Division 4? I mean, obviously the top prizes are smaller, but
probably it was just that a lot of people in the Sorare community were like, we should be in Division 4. Division 4 is the best ROI right now, which I didn't know if I necessarily agreed with, but it was the best ROI. And my conspiracy theory is Sorare saw that and was like, okay, we need to cut Division 4. I don't know if that's true, but when I look at this, I think to myself, okay, I'm just going to relegate myself to Division 5.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a fairly significant difference between 3 and 4. And so you could have the idea of, I'll go up to 3 because there's a lot more paid out. I assume there are more, actually, I don't know if there are more competitors in 3. I would assume so, that there are more lineups.
Yeah, so I think it's about the same amount of lineups between 3 and 4. I mean, 5 and 1 are always the smallest, but the points you need, which I haven't represented on here, but the points you need is also higher in Division 3 than Division 5. So it's really strange. And the other interesting thing that I wanted to put on this, if you go to rank/copy, because I didn't make it look pretty, go hover over 1 and change it to 4. So that removes ranks 1 through 3. And it's a really interesting comparison between Div 1 and Div 2 in terms of how that tail worth of money looks. I mean, I understand that there's less people in Division 1, but this is also sort of where my mind starts thinking should that tail be even longer in Division 1 than it is in Division 2? Not to cut out maybe some of the top prize money a little bit, but it seems like those first 3 spots in Div 1, that's really valuable. Like,
yeah,
you really need to finish in those spots to get your ROI, which is really difficult.
I'm glad you brought this up earlier about how I mean, I think this is the correct way to look at it, but we know obviously many people are not looking at this, but essentially that the EV is based off of the best prize that you can win, that you want to be able to turn whatever money you turn into to the maximum. But the reason why a lot of people are not trying to go into Division 1 is specifically because that feels unrealistic. So it's like, oh, let me just get my $5. Is there any consideration by you about like, what if I'm just on the end of the tail there instead of actually in these top 3 spots when you're doing your own lineups?
Yeah, so that's something I do think about a lot. Like, that's something I'm trying to build into this like dashboard I have, where I can remove ranks 1 through 3 to recalculate the EVs to see like, okay, what's a more realistic place that I'll finish? And I can kind of do the quick math on it because I know the equations behind the scenes, but it's hard to visualize that, and the API doesn't play too nice. But it's something I consider. But then when I think about it, it's like, I think scoring is about 25 points lower in Division 2 than Division 1 to finish 4 in season. And I think to myself, if I happen to finish in those 25 points, I would have missed out on $5 or $7 or however, $6, however much it is. But let's say I finish, towards the bottom end of the tail of Div 1. That's likely going to be in a similar range as Div 2 in terms of money, if not a little bit more. So what I'm missing out in those 25 points, I think, is progressively made up through the ranks as you go in Div 1. And then if you do just hit a crazy score, there's nothing you can do in Div 2. Like, you're just at a disadvantage if you're playing that. It's, I think, a $500 difference. That is 100 weeks of finishing in that 25-point region. I think that's where it becomes like clear in my mindset. I need to play Division 1. 100 game weeks, like, that's crazy. Like, I'm going to have a completely different gallery in 100 game weeks. I'll be able to buy the platform twice over with 5 ETH at that point. Like,
let's hope not. Let's hope not. Vita said, if you want to incentivize people to spend money on better cards, you need to make Division 1 the best at all costs. And I don't think anyone has said it like that before, that you would need 100 game weeks of winning $5 to equal that $500 payout. It's a great way to put it, because I think there's just a huge emphasis on winning something all the time. And it kind of goes back to like when they changed the threshold where you pick your target and everyone's like, oh yeah, you got to pick the middle one. It's always the middle one, because like you only have to hit it, every few times, and that is so much better than taking the lower one. But I think people generally, they just want to win something more often. Like, I think a lot of people on this platform literally will sacrifice upside. As we see how many people are trying to get relegated, that people will absolutely sacrifice upside for consistent winning. But even the consistent winning is hard. Like,
yeah, I think like we've been conditioned on Sorare, especially the users that have been here a long time, on churn. It's always been about churn, thresholds. What can we chip away with every game week? And we're using that same approach for the in-season stuff, which I just think is the wrong approach. It's hard to win, but it's not about just churning out the $5 every week. It's about, can I put myself where I finish in maybe even 10th place and I get $100? Like that, it's still a sizable difference between Div 1 and Div 2 if you're finishing in the top 10. And all of that stuff adds up over time. Like, it's a big deal. And we should be focused on winning more than just like, ooh, let me try to sneak in at 378.
KB said Cap 240 did irreversible damage, which I don't know if it's completely irreversible, but we're good. Koosjay, I don't understand why prize pools aren't based on number of entries. Let's say 10% of people win, 100 people in Division 1, so 10 people win. So they're doing this with boxes now. I actually don't think they can do this with cash for a lot of reasons, one of which is legal. And I think Sorare, it's no surprise to anybody if I say this, but Sorare kind of are in this gray area of contest versus fantasy game versus, it's definitely not gambling, but like in the States with like DFS operators, like they have to show what the actual cash prize pool is before anyone enters. And so basically the top 10%, you don't know what the prize pool is until you know how many entries there are. And you don't know how many entries there are until the game week locks. And so I don't think from a cash payout perspective that we'll ever see percentages. Yeah. Rikamon said, as someone who's won cash every weekend since the update, I feel attacked. Everybody feels attacked whenever we say anything. And Toby said, my poker background just has me looking at the number one spot. Always. It's all about that jackpot. Yeah. Vita said, if you haven't played more than 2 years, you're unlikely to have ever won a division, but your odds of finishing first in Division 1 are actually not that low anymore, especially in rare. I think that is kind of an interesting byproduct of divisions, which was clearly the case, or clearly the point, that previously in order to get the top prize, like you had to beat everyone, and now you only have to beat those in your division. And so even from that point of view, it's, easier to win.
Yeah, and also with divisions, like I feel like I've been pretty negative to start the show on divisions, but I think they're actually really good. They've allowed Sorare to kind of gamify the game in another aspect. That doesn't mean you have to like go and buy like what was it, like XP boost or fitness boost that they were playing. Like it's something to look forward to if they can just nail the motivation to get up to the first division a little bit better. It'll be perfect.
But really, there's no other way to do it other than just making the Division 1 prizes so much better.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with how it's structured right now, if you go back to the homepage, we can talk about this, is we have Division 1, which is really good. But then we kind of look at Division 2, Division 3, Division 4, Division 5, and they're kind of all in the same region. So it feels like if you're not in Division 1, let's hunt for a place where we can settle, where we can maybe need the least amount of points, because the EVs are about the same. It doesn't feel right now like there's really good progression between Division 4, 3, and 2. It's about getting to Division 1, which is the most important, but they're not nailing that feel yet either.
I'm not sure they need to. Like, I guess the way I think of it from the gameplay perspective, if the goal is to get to Division 1, then you don't really need incentives to get from 5 to 4 and 4 to 3. Like those are just the steps you take to 1. And I don't think that there's a realistic outcome where we're like, I'm in Division 5 and then I get up to 3 and I'm like, I'm good. I'm just going to stay here. Like ultimately, what division you are in doesn't matter if you're not in 1. And that everything you should be doing should be getting to 1. And then once you're there, win all you want.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair too. Like maybe it should just be crazy up in the top division, and like that's enough.
Right.
I think what also doesn't help, we can kind of look on that, like the blue bars on the right, is I think everybody instinctively knows that kind of Div 5 is like where people are putting their throwaway lineups. And then in conjunction, the fact that like especially the in-season prizes for Division 5 right now have less, are better than Div 4. So we have less good lineups there and more money than Div 4. Like that's where we start looking at like taking different pieces when we visualize things. Okay, we've got our EV. We can kind of see what looks good here. We've got our points. We can see where we need to land points wise. And then we see kind of how many people are wasting lineups, or how many of these participant counts are actually real. Mm-hmm. And then once we make those adjustments, it's like, oh my goodness, Div 5. Put me in Div 5, please.
How are you defining like a throwaway lineup?
So there's a couple of filters I have on the top. It doesn't look like it's all perfectly aligned right now. It's one of those things that on the cloud version doesn't always work great. But in the top, you see there's like this less than 150 and do not consider. So right now, that throwaway percentage is looking at lineups that are 150 points or less. I think those are really bad lineups. Like those would probably have DMPs in it, or just like sub cards, or kind of those final pieces in a player's gallery just to have another lineup for fun. Yep. And then the do not consider, I have it toggled off right now, so I look at all of the participant counts. But if you have it toggled on, it'll adjust those participant counts down by the percentage of people who would have real lineups.
Right.
So when you do that, it will change the EV calculation because that base is different. And then you can adjust the scoring. So if you want to look at 200 points, lineups with less than 200 points, you could do that, or less than 250, like whatever you feel is a garbage lineup, you can make that adjustment there.
I just look at where my lineups are. That's the garbage line. Agent Cooper said, do you think classic competitions will become more and more undesirable as the years go by? In a few years' time, there'll be players with almost 1,000 cards each. Will in-season be a better ROI? I got an answer to that too, but I'd like you to answer first.
Well, I think the answer is absolutely yes. I think classic season will become extremely difficult, and you will need a lot of points to do well there, because there's going to be so many cards of the best. Like, there's just going to be so many cards. Like, I'm thinking limited. It's basically just going to turn into, you have to have stars. Like, who is playing the right stars in all of the divisions to win? It already feels like that, but that's what it's really going to turn into. Right now we don't have that big of an adjustment. So if we look at the like EV calculations between classic and in season, that ratio isn't nearly as crazy, but that ratio is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger every year as the base of players grows, as the amount of cards available grows, because in season is fixed, classic isn't.
Yeah. So this has come up in a few different podcasts recently and some Discord conversations, just like what happens when all of the in-season like current in-season cards move to classic. And I think it kind of ignores that has basically been what has happened for the last 5 years in Sorare. Like, before the in-season competitions, all the new season cards went into classic because like that's all we had. And so I think it's obviously different now because it's kind of really this huge rush of cards into classic competitions. But like, this has been kind of Sorare's problem for 5 years, that like every year it's more and more cards that are coming into the competitions. And because at least previously all we had to win were cards, like at some point they're going to run out of rewards. Like, there're just going to be too many people. And everybody always talked about it, when there are a million users, like there's just not enough rewards for those users, which is why we see boxes now and all this stuff. But like, it's the same problem. It's just now we're getting this rush of cards from the in-season comps starting in August.
I think it will be interesting. There's sort of this like devil's advocate side of things where, if we think prices for a classic card should get lower, they have less utility. Like, they can't win you cash, they can only win you cards. Like, how like high, like those EV calculations are going to get really interesting because there's only going to be a limited number of people in those in-season competitions and a lower number in the classic competitions. So are we going to see more people kind of want to exit classic and push up in-season card prices more, making it more expensive to play there? And therefore like kind of making the value of what you win in classic worth more, because you win cards. And if a lot of people want those cards because they want less competition, maybe we can see a lift there. I don't think the chances of that are maybe necessarily as high, but like that could happen.
Based on the gameplay and kind of what we just talked about, what do you expect? And I don't want to require you to put like numbers down, but like, do you expect that the new season European cards will be priced similarly to what we are seeing now? Well, not now, but like what we saw early on, or higher or lower?
I think champion cards, like I think about champion cards. I think they're going to be insane. Like, I think for a limited card, like I just think like Mbappe in season at Madrid, if he goes to Madrid, will be over $1,000. Like, I just don't see how people are going to just be like, that is such a valuable card, and there are not that many people playing that. And I can put him in La Liga, which will be a very concentrated area. Like, I think we're going to see some crazy card prices, combined with the fact that we see what the prize pools are like for the Premier League and Champs. That's where Sorare want us to play. They want us to spend a lot of money there, probably because their licenses are expensive. So what Mbappe, especially getting that at the start of the season, with surrounding him with a collection, um, and having that XP boost, like it's just going to be it's going to be so valuable to have a card like that. I think people are going to go. It's going to be insane. I think it's almost, and that's where it's like a good thing for Sorare, and it's a good thing for those classic competitions at the start, because if you can win something at the start of the season, that's going to probably set you up. You can sell that for cash probably right away, or if you want to, like, that's one less piece I need to buy. But I worry on the flip side, how burnt are people going to feel if they're not very good at the game? Which I think, like, a lot of people need to admit that maybe they're not very good at the game, or that it's just more expensive to play now because you have to be willing to reinvest every year if your return isn't that good. That's part of the reason I personally have made a shift down to limited. I still like having rares and playing my classic rares, but for me, it's just I don't want to, like, spend that much money every season having to repurchase rares if I don't do well enough. But on the limited side of things, I'm happy to do that. Like, I think that's sort of a good ground. Like, I'm excited, and I'll be excited for next MLS season when I can rebuy new collections and cards and play in season. And so, like, that's where maybe that mindset needs to shift as well for users.
I think one of the biggest I was going to call it a problem, but that's not fair. But I think one of the biggest problems with the in-season competitions is because, like we said, the prize pool, how much you know exactly what the prize pool, what the prizes are worth. And it's not these like moving values of, if you win this card or this card, this one's worth this one's worth this today, but maybe not tomorrow. Like, the cash prizes are very clear. This is how much you win. And so when you buy cards, you have to say, okay, this is how much I spent. This is how much I have to win. And this is my time frame, like 9 months, basically. And it's going to make people who are not good at this game realize they're not good very quickly. And with cards, you kind of always have that, like, well, if they're good in 3 years, then this was a great reward. But cash and essentially an expiration date on most cards, like limited and rare. We always talk about, oh, you can use one classic card in season, but like, it's just one, or 3 in 3 lineups. Like, it's just, people have dozens of these cards. And that's my biggest fear and I agree. I think the prices for the early in-season cards will be absurd. And I do think that, I hope that the people paying those prices really understand what they're doing, and we don't get flooded in January and February with, my card is worth a quarter than what I paid for it, and blaming Sorare for it.
You're being way too optimistic. Why are we even pretending? Like, that will absolutely happen.
I gotta be a glass half full guy right now. But you're right. I mean, we see it now. Vita said there's a difference. However, the scaling is different now because of the split between in-season and classic. And if the user base scaled, it will also impact differently than before. If Sorare were to double their user base, you'd actually create actual scarcity for in-season cards, thus driving the prices upwards much faster than it would have been before. Yeah, I think just here, KB, astronomically higher.
What do you think, like, limited Mbappe, if he's at Madrid, goes for?
What does limited Mbappe go for now?
200, 300 maybe?
Really? What are we doing, guys? Let me see here. Hold on. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Hold on. Here we go. So $280. I think there is a possibility that it is, I was literally going to say 10 times this, like 2,800. Oh man, that's so much money for a limited card. I think your 1,000 is low for the
Okay.
first few. I think, you know, what really will affect all of this is how they sell the cards early on. Like if 10 limited Mbappes are available in the first week, that's very different than if 100 are available. And so that's the question we're all waiting to get answers for, of like, what will be the the new season card distribution look like in terms of auctions and instant buys and how many are available? Because if the prize pools come out and, like I said, and we only get 10 Mbappes for the first game week, that becomes much more valuable than if there are 100.
Yeah, I'd be curious to like take a look back at what happened with MLS. I guess that was kind of the first fully licensed league to come out in the new season format. And I wonder what their mints are looking like. I feel like they're pretty high, but
like as of now.
Yeah, but I think I was messaging MPen and I was like, they were in like the second week of the MLS special and there were already like 20 mints of some rare cards. And I was like, they're going crazy.
So it's May 8th. Lucho Acosta has 41 of the 100 rares for the season. And it limited these at 167.
And we're 30% through the season. So they're minting at a faster pace than he's played games.
Which, in fairness, is what we want. Like, we want the cards. It's just a matter of how many we get early on. Like, I've heard this idea that they should just sell all of them. And it's like they don't want to do that at all.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little scared is maybe not the right word, but they want to be cautious with that transition from cards becoming in season to classic and not just dumping classic every year.
Yeah. I was just showing a bunch of people's guesses for that first Mbappe. Ben says the first 5 at 1,000 instant buy to unlock the auctions would be crazy. I mean, it's really, Toby said it'll be fun to see the 2,700 euro instant buy Mbappe 5 minutes before the deadline. And I agree with this. What Vita says, the auction to instant buy ratio will be really interesting because surely they don't offer instant buys before the first couple auctions, but maybe they do.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to like watch that ratio of participants for those first few game weeks and in season versus classic, because we're going to see a lot of people overpay, I think.
Yeah. I like this. Quinny Mbappe goes for 1 bid more than originally intended. Yeah, 10K rare Mbappe instant buy. So the one, I think this is separate from limited because I don't think he doesn't play limited. But I think that there is a non-zero chance, and I don't know what percentage to put on this, but I think there is a chance that Pranksy tries to buy everything. Like, I'm actually not kidding. That, again, depending on how many rares they come out with,
yeah,
would they just be better off buying them all?
I'm also really curious how they're going to handle, I haven't watched the super rare and the rare side of things too much, or super rare and unique side of things too much. But when are they going to put out those auctions for those unique cards, especially? Like, are they going to try to front load the stars much earlier than typical?
I mean, they have to, right? Like, they seem so adamant that these cash competitions will be open on day one. And granted, you only need 3 uniques only 3 in-season uniques. But in order to have enough, and it's still multi-entry. And so in order to have that many uniques, like, you have to do a ton of them early on.
Yeah.
which we've never seen before. Agent Cooper's thinking blind auctions. Oof. Vita's on the Dutch auction idea. If they push limited Mbappe, 3,500 instant buy, but it's losing $50 every 10 seconds, it'll be very fun to watch.
So I see Rico Man kind of with an earlier comment. I think people will use Mbappe old season. I think this is like a really interesting strategy conversation, because my personal opinion is you should not be owning the, unless there's a drastic price difference, you should not be owning those cards as old season cards. Like those cards should be in season, because if you know you're going to use it every single week, I would rather leave a slot open for an old season card that I can just go quickly buy off the market to fill a gap for a week, because I'm going to pay a lot less, combined with the fact that I can stack it with a collection bonus, the in-season bonus, and it's really easy to move the XP up. Like I think about my limited Messi, like I would purposely bought an in-season version and it's at like 13% now.
Feels like cheating.
Yeah, it's 113 points every week.
Yeah, I think I agree that the Dutch, you know what? Dutch auction would be fun for me as a content creator, since they killed auction watches with their max bid. Yeah, and somebody made a comment that we already see like the Haaland complaints about how much they spent early on. There it is, KB. How much they spent in August and now how it's less valuable now. Those first few, again, I don't know what their solution is. Some people kind of speculated these like, what do they call them? Not like silhouette cards, but basically like fillers until they get like the real card. So you're basically buying a limited or rare or super rare Mbappe, but it's not the actual card yet. But I think just the volume of cards that they're going to sell early on will determine everything. I mean, it's as simple as that.
It'll be awesome to watch. I always like on Twitter when I think it's like that Sobase account comes up with like what the auction volume is looking like and the instant buy volume is looking like, especially when it's broken out by, I think he's done it by leagues, but by limited and all of that. It'll be crazy. Like, yeah. I think it will be insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Placeholder silhouette cards is basically like what we have in Rivals when the player is not, yeah. That's right, Quinny. Fungible tokens. Yeah, hell yeah. Agent Cooper says 90% of users will use the goalkeeper position as the classic limited position in their lineups, but I actually think getting in-season goalies could be an edge in limited, allowing you to play your classic Mbappe. I'm always on team new season goalkeeper, or not using a goalkeeper for whatever spot that everybody thinks they should use it.
Yeah, definitely.
Although that's sort of use your in-season goalkeeper so you can use your old Mbappe, but you just shut that down. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, in season is very much also an XP game as well for some of the main cards that get used. Like I think about MLS with like Messi, and it's like, goodness, I need him on a crazy XP guy, because I know if I have him on a crazy XP, I'll have an edge there, and then I don't need to worry about that spot because he's always going to be in a lineup captained, and I'll have a slight advantage there, and it becomes pick 4 for me instead of pick 5.
Yeah. That's my favorite part about owning a Messi, is making my lineup 4. Just 4 decisions now. Not even a captain decision. Not 5 and a captain, just like that is set. All right. I've taken up a lot of your time. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up that we haven't yet?
I mean, no, I think that's all. It's been great to be on. So thanks for having me.
So the dashboard is available to anyone. Is that correct?
It is. It is. I can't promise how often it'll be updated. It takes time to publish and do all these things and make it look pretty, but I'll try my best to keep it as updated as possible. At worst, I'll make sure it's like, it'll have trends in there. So if you're ever curious about how some stuff is trending, that's the stuff I'm always most interested in. And that's what I want to show, because there's lots of other great tools Like I live on Sorare data. I just look for trends here.
Yeah, great. I'll link the dashboard in the description of this video on YouTube. Peter also has a Medium, which is just at Peter Stojanov, so check that out. Although the dashboard is definitely updated more often than the Medium. Writing is hard, though. I'll give Peter full out on that one. But yeah, so thank you everybody for joining. If you could please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to Quinny, who is right there. And Peter, thank you for coming on. And I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about what we talked about. And so we'll probably have to just have you come back.
Okay, well, I'll be happy to come back. Just let me know.
That's what I'm looking for. All right. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, top work, Peter. All right. Thanks, everyone, and good luck out there.